911, what's your emergency? The caller's voice was shaking. I'm near the Jordan River Trail. There's blood, a lot of it. I think it might be an animal, but there's a red shoe in the water, a child's shoe. I think you'd better come. In the early morning hours of March 11, 2012, the Jordan River was swarming with investigators. The scene was grim, blood-splattered rocks, a child's shoe floating in the water. Hours of searching. On the other side of the river, a body, beaten and lifeless. The victim was a teenage girl, her red shirt and blue jeans soaked through. Her face bore the brutal signs of a brutal attack, with lacerations and injuries that made her unrecognizable. The scene was horrifying, a senseless act of violence that would grip the community and set off an investigation rife with brutality and danger. The victim was identified as Annie Kasner, a 15-year-old with a troubled past and a bright smile that hid inner struggles. Just the night before, her mother, Veronica Kasner, and stepfather, James Braddock, had returned from a date night and found Annie at home. She greeted them cheerfully, but an hour later, she was gone. A note was found in her room, hastily written. I'm going to California. I can't stand the lies anymore. I'm sorry. Veronica was distraught. She called the police to report Annie as a runaway and contacted her daughter's boyfriend, Chris Bellinger, for answers. Chris claimed he didn't know where she was but seemed worried, his words faltering. The next morning, Veronica watched the news and the details sent a chill down her spine. A body matching Annie's description had been found. Her fear turned to devastation when investigators confirmed that Annie's braces matched the victim's dental records. Annie's life was tumultuous. She grew up in an orphanage, moving from house to house until Veronica, then a social worker, adopted her. Though Veronica loved her dearly, Annie's past left its scars. Diaries found in her room revealed her longing for stability, a family of her own, and her obsession with Chris. Her schoolmates shared rumors. Annie had told friends that she was pregnant with Chris's child. But then an autopsy revealed the truth: Annie wasn't pregnant. So why lie? Veronica assumed Annie had fabricated the pregnancy as a desperate plea for the love and security she craved. Investigators suspected that Chris had more to reveal and decided to dig deeper. Chris's initial interview was candid. He told detectives that Annie had confided in him about running away but insisted that he had tried to dissuade her. He described the last time he saw her, even mentioning a strange detail: Annie had a nosebleed that accidentally stained his shoes while they were at the home of her friend Spencer Mallory. Spencer confirmed the story, but inconsistencies soon emerged. A search of Spencer's home found no evidence of blood, and Spencer began to waver under further questioning, admitting that he had believed Chris's account of the nosebleed. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure emerged in the investigation: LJ, a boyfriend Annie had mentioned in her diary. Friends claimed Annie often talked about LJ, describing him as a protector. He was older, possibly gang-affiliated. Phone records showed that Annie had received multiple calls from a blocked number on the night of her death. Could this be LJ? A week into the investigation, an informant came forward. Joanna Franklin, a petty criminal with a reputation for manipulation, claimed she had witnessed Annie's murder. Her story was chilling. She said LJ had flown into a rage after an argument with Annie, beating her mercilessly before throwing her body into the river. Joanna offered details: her clothing, the location of the crime, that seemed plausible. But her story soon unraveled. Investigators discovered that Joanna had gathered her information from news reports, fabricating the story to negotiate leniency on unrelated charges. LJ, the alleged killer, remained elusive, and the investigation was back to square one. Detectives reviewed Annie's phone records. They made a shocking discovery: the intercepted calls were coming from a second phone registered to Chris Bellinger. Faced with this evidence, Chris' composure broke. He confessed that LJ didn't exist. Annie had made him up to make Chris jealous, and the lie had made him jealous. On the night Annie died, Chris had agreed to meet her by the river. She wanted to run away together. But instead of helping, Chris brought a weapon, a shovel. Chris's confession was haunting. He described beating Annie in a fit of rage, hitting her repeatedly until she collapsed. As she lay unconscious, he placed the shovel on her forehead and jumped on her, making sure she would never wake up. He then dragged her body into the river and let the current carry her away. He returned home, fabricated an alibi, and posted on social media the next day, mourning Annie as if he were innocent. Further evidence cemented his guilt. Chris's bike matched the description of a bike seen by a witness near the river. His second phone contained a timeline of events that eerily matched the crime. Chris even instructed Spencer to tell police about the nosebleed, an attempt to explain what investigators might find. His web of lies was eventually uncovered. Just 14 years old at the time of the murder, Chris faced the possibility of being tried as a juvenile, which could have meant release at 21. But the brutality of the crime convinced prosecutors to try him as an adult. In court, additional testimony came from a fellow inmate who claimed Chris had bragged about the murder, describing in chilling detail how he had planned the attack after learning about Annie's fake pregnancy. Chris pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2034. Annie Kasner's death sent shockwaves through the community, a tragic end to a young life filled with potential. Her story is more than a criminal case, it is a cautionary tale about the hidden consequences of despair, the devastation caused by unchecked anger, and the ripple effects of deceit. For those who knew her, Annie's murder was a poignant reminder of the frailty of youth and the fragility of trust. Annie's life was not easy. Although Veronica Kasner adopted her in hopes of providing her with the stability she had lacked in her early years, Annie's past left her yearning for the recognition, love, and sense of belonging. Her diaries, filled with dreams of starting her own family and her obsession with Chris, painted a picture of a girl who felt incomplete, struggling to hold on to the few relationships that made her feel whole. She invented LJ not to maliciously manipulate Chris, but to pique his interest, to bond with him more closely. In a cruel twist of fate, however, that lie cost her her life. For the Kasner family, the revelation of Annie's final moments was a source of endless grief. Veronica, who had worked so hard to provide Annie with a safe and loving environment, was haunted by the belief that she had somehow failed to protect her. Friends and neighbors who had watched Annie grow up and shared her laughter and her struggles were devastated. They grappled with the knowledge that behind her radiant smile lay pain and longing they had not yet fully understood. Chris Bellinger's confession left no room for doubt about his guilt, but it brought no peace to those who mourned Annie. The brutality of the crime, coupled with the elaborate lies he told afterward, painted a chilling portrait of a young man consumed by jealousy and anger. Chris also became a tragic figure in his own right, a teenager whose emotions drove his actions, forever altering the course not only of Annie's life but of his own. For law enforcement, the case exposed the complexities of solving a crime rooted in personal relationships. Detectives faced layers of lies and misinformation that threatened to derail their investigation. The emergence of false witnesses like Joanna Franklin, who exploited the tragedy for personal gain, tested the team's resolve and patience. However, through persistence and meticulous attention to detail, they were able to bring the real culprit to justice. The trial brought the community together in collective outrage and grief, but it also highlighted the harsh realities of youth violence and its consequences. The courtroom was filled with emotion as friends, teachers, and neighbors listened to the gruesome details of Annie's death. The chilling revelation of Chris's calculated actions, his attempts to create an alibi, his staged social media posts mourning Annie's death, and his coaching of Spencer, painted a picture of a mind all too comfortable with manipulation. For many, the question is not just how Chris could have committed such an act, but why no one saw the warning signs in time to intervene. Annie's case has become a flashpoint for conversations about mental health, the impact of trauma, and the importance of community support for teens. schools in the area began implementing more robust counseling programs, and community organizations stepped in to provide resources for teens struggling with similar challenges. But for all the lessons learned, the wounds left by Annie's death remain raw. A memorial near the Jordan River, where her body was found, is decorated with flowers, letters, and photos left by those who loved her. Every year on the anniversary of her death, friends and family gather there to remember her, sharing stories of the laughter, dreams, and light she brought to their lives. The case serves as a stark reminder: beneath the surface of even the most ordinary lives, emotions can simmer, unchecked and unspoken, until they explode into tragedy. Annie's story is a call to action, a call to look closer, listen more carefully, and extend compassion to those who may be silently struggling. Annie's life, though tragically cut short, continues to resonate in the hearts of those who knew her. The fight for justice, though painful, serves as a testament to her memory, ensuring that her story will not be forgotten, even though the community has been forever changed.